Find angle measures if given two sides of a right triangle. All right, so in this process, we're still looking for the correct trig function, and for all of these practice problems, the example I do, the one you're going to try within this video, and then the practice problems you're going to try as well, let's do this in reference to angle T. So always in reference to angle T, let's try. So if I were to find the right trig function like we've been doing, I need to identify where T is, and it's down in the bottom left this time. And so the pieces that it gives me, the two sides that it gives me in reference to T, are opposite and hypotenuse. This is always the hypotenuse across from the right angle. So if I could reference SOHCAHTOA, I would see that sine is the trig function I need because that has the opposite and the hypotenuse. So I'm going to write out sine of angle T because we're trying to find the actual angle measure this time. We've done this before where we've found an unknown side or that type of thing, and we've been given an angle. This time we're trying to find the actual angle measure given two sides. So I'm going to write sine of T, and I know that I'm going to be solving for T, and I'm going to equal it to the ratio of sine, opposite over hypotenuse, equals 29 over 34. And that is the first step for all these, setting up the correct trig function ratio. Alright, so if you'll call upon sine, cosine, or trig knowledge based on what two pieces of information they give you on the triangle in question. So from here then, after I've set it up correctly, the new learning in this piece, because that's technically, we've done that before, setting up trig ratios. The new learning is, in order to get rid of a trig function, because if you notice, T is on the left-hand side of my equation, and the only thing there with T is the sine function. In order to get rid of that, I can't multiply, divide, add, or subtract. I have to take the inverse of the sine function. All right, those cancel each other out. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. And it's going to be the sine inverse of 29 over 34. So those cancel out, so I'm left with T equals that mass. So I'll take out a calculator. And remember, make sure your calculators are in degree mode because we're working with degrees. And I'm going to punch in second sine. If you look on your calculator and you get this blue second button, that'll bring up the option above the sine button to get to the sine inverse option. And I'm going to put, so I hit second sine to get the sine inverse, and I'm going to put 29 divided by 34 and close up the parenthesis and hit enter. And I get 58.5 degrees. So angle T right here is 58.5 degrees. So hopefully you tried that along with my calculator and you got the same thing for your calculator. Two things to check. Make sure you entered it in correctly, or make sure your calculator is in degree mode. If you didn't get 58.5, double check that or raise your hand. Now I'm going to have you pause the video and try one of these on your own in reference to angle T. So set up the trig function and then take the inverse of both sides to give me the value of that angle T. So go ahead and pause the video and try that. You should have paused the video and tried this one on your own at this point. I didn't make note of it. The opposite side of angle T was a 14 and a radical 3. That could freak somebody out, but again, that's just a number. It's an irrational number, so you can treat it as such. And if you notice, I set up my trig function. I got the tangent this time because they gave me the opposite and the adjacent in reference to T. So I put tangent of T equals 14 radical 3 on top over 34. So it's the same thing. I punched that in exactly like I see it. The tangent inverse of 14 radical 3, then I had to hit over on my calculator and divided that by 34, closed up the parenthesis, and you should get T to equal 35.5 degrees. If you did not get that, please raise your hand and I'll come check your work. Otherwise, you are free to move on to the 5 practice problems. Your goal is 5 out of 5. Thank you for watching.